I saw something on TikTok a few days ago that I thought was such a very clear demonstration of how so many of these spiritual laws that we're working with actually function in real life. It was just such a beautiful example or demonstration. So this girl recorded herself playing a crystal singing bowl, and then she set the bowl down, played the recording back right next to the original bowl, but the bowl was now dormant and sitting there silent. And as the note rang out from the recording, the bowl itself began to vibrate again. It began to hum and sing along with the recording because it resonated. And I realized that this is exactly how a trigger works. We see spiritual teachers express this in so many different ways and across so many different philosophies. And I'm going to tell you about some of them that have come into my mind around this subject over these past few days. So most of us have been believing for most of our lives that it's other people's behavior, other people's words, or the circumstances that are outside of us that are upsetting us. And if you're like me and you've been on the spiritual path, then you probably already know that that is, of course, not the case. But it's what most of us have experienced for most of our lives, or have believed, I should say, for most of our lives. Someone yells at us, someone criticizes us, someone doesn't text us back. That person outside of us is the problem. That situation outside of us is the problem, or so we thought. But here's what the singing bowl demonstrates. An upset cannot activate you. It can't pull you into any kind of a reaction unless there's already something within you that resonates with it. That's what resonance is. And so if you only resonate with it if there's a part of you that agrees with it. So that goes directly to what Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in his book, The Four Agreements. So we'll get there. But think about it this way. If someone says something critical about your parenting style and it cuts deep, you get really defensive, you feel very upset, and you want to prove them wrong. For example, I'm not a parent, but this just feels like a relatable, understandable example. The only reason you got upset is because there was a part of you that agreed with the criticism. There was a part of you that believed you weren't doing it right, or there was a part of you that thought maybe you weren't good enough as a parent. That's the agreement. That's why the bowl hummed. That's where the resonance was. On the other hand, if they had criticized you for something that you genuinely did not believe about yourself, you might not have even heard it, or it might have just, you might have heard it and just kind of let it pass through, like in one ear, out the other. Like if someone tries to argue with me that my name is Amanda, that's not going to bother me. The resonance isn't there because I know my name is Morgan. I don't agree that my name is Amanda. There's nothing inside of me resonating with me. So there's no reason that it is going to upset me. So it's never about what is said. It's always about what we believe. So we also see this same teaching in the Zen Buddhism story about the monk and the lake. You've probably heard it, but I'll just tell a quick version of it for those who haven't. There was a monk meditating in the middle of a lake, in a canoe or a boat or something, just peacefully meditating with his eyes closed for a long time. And he's deep in his meditation, blissed out, so peaceful. And then what feels like another boat begins softly bumping up against his boat. And his eyes are still closed. He was locked into his meditation. He's trying to stay there, trying to stay peaceful and trying to stay in his meditation, but he can feel his anger rising because why would somebody in this huge lake, this wide open expanse, come all the way out to his spot and disturb his meditation like that? Who would be so careless to do that? And so his peace is shattered. His frustration and anger is rising. His meditation is ruined. And he finally opens his eyes, all prepared to scold someone, only to discover that the boat bumping into his boat is totally empty. There's nobody in it. So there's nobody to be angry at. And so suddenly the monk starts laughing out loud as like the truth kind of bubbles up within him. And he realizes that the upset is never about another person. It never is. The upset lived inside of him, and it was just awoken because the boat was bumping up against him. But he thought there was something to upset him that wasn't there. The cause of the upset is never outside of us, is basically what that story is about. So love the Zen Buddhism example. We also see the same teaching in Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. He calls it the pain body. So these old wounds, these patterns that we're still carrying, he calls it the pain body. And he says, even an innocent remark from someone close to us can activate the pain body when it's ready to awaken, not because the remark itself was harmful, but because it resonated with a pain pattern from the past. He uses the word resonance as well. And in the Four Agreements, which I alluded to before, Don Miguel Ruiz says, we make unconscious agreements with ourselves and with other people about who we are, about what we believe to be true, and about what we're capable of. And those agreements they become like little software programs that are quietly running the show in the background of our lives without our awareness. Just like a software program on a computer. It's just humming along, doing its thing. We're not even aware that it's happening. They're like the dormant singing bowl. And so some examples of agreements you might have made. A parent said you were too much, too loud, and you filed that away as something you agreed with when you were a little child. Or a teacher said you would never amount to anything. That got filed away as something you agreed with. Or a preacher or a priest or somebody said that you were a sinner, that you were inherently bad and broken. And you filed that away with all the others as something that you agreed with. So now all of these programs are running and humming along in the background. And so when anyone says anything that matches those programs, that's the resonance, that's the trigger. So here's how we break free of the agreements. According to A Course in Miracles, it takes only a little willingness. And I say that little willingness looks like awareness, or it makes way for awareness. So if we become willing to see these patterns, to see these programs, to bring awareness to what's actually going on, that's the open door. Awareness is curative. This is something you will commonly hear people say in spiritual circles. Awareness is curative. It's the open door. It creates a little crack that lets the light in. And so once we bring awareness to the agreements that we made, then suddenly they lose their power. They begin to lose their power. It's like taking a flashlight under the bed and discovering that there's actually no monster hiding underneath. There's nothing to fear. So the moment you question the agreement, you can choose a different one. You can begin writing a new program and begin rewiring those neural pathways. So my invitation to you is that the next time you're triggered, maybe you can just get curious and just invite that little willingness, invite a little bit of awareness, maybe question, what am I believing about myself that allowed this to upset me? What do I agree with here? Remember the empty boat. The bump happened, but there's nobody in the boat to blame. That upset is yours. And that's actually a powerful awareness because it gives you your power back. If you're not farming your power to outside sources, believing that somebody else can cause your upset and you're just in the boat being like pushed along against your will, that's powerlessness. But if all of a sudden the only person who can upset you is you, now you're in control of the boat. You have your power back. So that's the practice that I'm inviting you into. But I also want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that you do this practice in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the trigger. I'm talking about examining it when the heat of the moment has passed. Maybe that's the next morning in your quiet time. Maybe it's a week later. Maybe it's a month later. Maybe you want to work on this with someone who's passed on and you still have unforgiveness around. It doesn't matter. Time is an illusion. You can do this at any time. Okay. But the invitation is that you do it in a space of quiet contemplation, prayer, journaling, whatever works for you. If you do try to get curious while you're in the thick of an upset, what often happens, at least in my experience, is that we end up weaponizing these spiritual truths against us. We get discombobulated, confused, stuck. The ego tries to make it mean something different, and it can be a spirally unhelpful situation. What's happening is another example of the singing bowl resonance at work. When we are activated into anger, sadness, guilt, shame, any of those emotions that vibrate under the level of 200, you can refer to David Hawkins' map of consciousness, scale of consciousness, if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But those emotions vibrate below 200. we're literally not a vibrational match for, we're not resonant with the higher emotions like clarity, truth, love. They cannot come in because you are not a vibrational match for them in the moment of the upset. So give yourself some grace, feel your feelings, be present with your experience. And when the dust settles, then you come back to yourself and you bring that willingness to examine the upset with grace and compassion. Replay the scenario. What would I like to do differently next time? Maybe you write a forgiveness letter. I can point you to an excellent resource for this in the description. Maybe you do a Byron Katie worksheet on it. I'll link that below too. Whatever it takes, whatever practice works for you. But in examining it and going through it again mentally, practicing the new response, that's how we rewire it. And that's how we reprogram it. That's how we pave the way for a more loving response the next time the trigger happens. And I'm not talking about a more loving response towards the other person. Maybe it's a more loving response towards yourself. But you will be guided in that. And keep in mind that we've been running the old program, the old agreements for decades, if not eons. So lifetime after lifetime. If you believe in reincarnation or if you don't, it's ancestral. Either way, literally eons. This shit has been passed down to us and through us. So be patient with yourself. Don't expect that you will stop being triggered by this upset overnight now that you have this information. A Course in Miracles does say that healing can happen in an instant. And I know that that is possible. I know that that is true. I also know that that's not usually how most of us experience it. It is an ongoing process of peeling back the layers and spiraling upward, and ever expanding, awakening, unlearning, remembering process. We come back to it over and over and over again. So there are those like the Byron Katies of the world and the Eckhart Tolles of the world who do have these like spontaneous awakenings, but let's be real, that is not the typical experience. So I just want you to give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of compassion as you do this work, okay? And one last thing I'll add, it is so helpful to do this work together in a spiritual community of like-minded friends who will lovingly hold you accountable and hold you in your holiness and your perfection without judgment and without getting into the drama with you. And that is a very powerful thing that helps us collectively move through this stuff so much faster. And I'm actually working with 4 friends to build a spiritual community as we speak. And we're planning to launch in the next few months. So stay tuned for more if that's something that speaks to you or that you feel like would be helpful and supportive. And if this video resonated, ding, 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 with something inside of you, I'd love for you to follow along. I'm going to be sharing lots more. Or actually, I should say, Spirit has lots more to share through me. I am the open vessel. I'm willing to be used by Spirit to share whatever may be helpful, what has been helpful to me. So we're only just getting started. I hope you'll follow along. Thank you. Love you. Bye.